Hey guys, welcome back to Rudder Innovations, where today we're going to be learning how to join pieces of wood together so you can make an awesome table like this. Here we go. All right, so here's the top that we're going to be putting together. Our top is about 30 inches wide by 50 inches long. Each one of these boards is about 7.5 inches wide, and these boards in the middle are about 35 inches in length. Now, we're going to start by ripping off the edges of these pieces of wood. That way they're going to join flat up against each other whenever we're using clamps to glue them together. And here's why. Typically when you purchase wood, there's a rounded edge on it. So if you put two rounded edges together, it's going to form a gap like this. So if you're okay with having a gap where you join your two pieces of wood together, then it's okay and you can leave it. But if you're not okay, and especially if it's going to be a kitchen table where food will get in there, you probably want to remove the edge. In this instance, we have rough cut cedar, which doesn't have a straight edge to begin with, and the edge that they do have has these little mill marks on there, which is going to cause gaps in between my wood. So I'm going to go ahead and rip off the edges of these boards to make a flat surface so they can be joined together. All right, now that we have the edges ripped off of our pieces of wood and they have a nice flat surface to join together, we're going to put these 4 pieces of wood together first, and then we'll take the 2 pieces on the end and join those together. Today we're going to be using a plate joiner in order to join these pieces of wood together. If you don't have a plate joiner, you can always take your board and use your table saw to rip a groove or a notch in the piece of wood, and then you can use a wooden yardstick, which is something that I've done in the past, to join 2 pieces of wood together. With a plate joiner, a blade will come out and an indentation will be made in the side of your board. Then you'll put biscuits in between the 2 pieces of wood and glue them together to help hold the 2 pieces of wood together. Whenever you're marking the spacing for your biscuits and where the slots will be for your plate joiner, you never want to be closer than 3 inches from the end of the pieces of wood that you're joining together. So you'll take a line and you'll mark it at 3 inches, and then every 6 inches after that, 6 to 12 inches, you'll put another indentation for another biscuit. It's important when you're drawing your mark for the spacing of the biscuits to extend your mark onto both pieces of wood. And the reason being is because when you use this line on your plate joiner to join the 2 pieces of wood together, you're making an indentation or a cavity for your biscuit in both spots of wood at the same exact location. Now we'll make the rest of our marks so we know where to put our slots with the plate joiner. Before you start to mix up all your boards, it'd be a good idea to number the boards. That way you can find the correct order and everything lines up just like you planned. Before I started cutting on my project, I used a sample piece of wood to set my fence height to make sure that my slot was going to fall in the center of the boards. Now that my fence height's set, I can go ahead and put slots on all of my marks. After we have these 4 pieces of wood together, then we'll know exactly the width to cut our 2 ends. That way they're perfectly in line with these 4 boards. When you're gluing together pieces of wood, it's a good idea to have scrap pieces of wood to go in between your project and your clamp. That way any dents that get left from the clamp will be on your scrap piece of wood and not on your project wood. Also, clamps have a tendency to make wood want to bow whenever you're tightening them. And so to help prevent that, you can take a longer piece of wood on the top and on the bottom, and you can clamp those together to keep your project or your tabletop straight. You can also alternate the clamps on the top and on the bottom to help prevent bowing. All right, for this top, I'm gonna be using Titebond 3 Ultimate Wood Glue. You'll flip the 2 pieces of wood that are gonna be joined together. You're gonna run some glue down the side And then you'll put your biscuits in. Make sure you get glue in those joints. If you want to use a little paintbrush, you can get in there really good and get the glue coated. And then you'll put it together and you'll move on to your next piece of wood. When you're clamping wood together, having a plan and everything ready prior to gluing is essential. Halfway through gluing, you don't want to realize that you need an extra clamp or 2x4 block. You can place tape on the clamp boards where they come in contact with the glue if you're concerned about them sticking, but wiping the excess glue off prior to clamping should be sufficient. All right, so we have 4 clamps holding together our 4 pieces of wood to hold it this way, and then we have 4 other clamps with a piece of wood on the top and on the bottom that are keeping our tabletop flat when it dries. After 24 hours, when the glue's dry, we'll take these clamps off and then we'll put our 2 pieces on the end of our tabletop. All right, all the glue's dry. We're gonna go ahead and take everything apart and then add the 2 sides on. Something I did not notice was that this board had a split in it. So when I turned it to the side and I put a little bit of weight on here whenever I was leaning over, and it split directly in half. So what I'm gonna do is join my 2 end pieces together like this, and then we're just gonna go and roll with a little bit of a live edge on this end and on the other end. All right, now that we have the 4 pieces glued together, again, we're going to add the 2 pieces on the end. To ensure there will be no gaps when joining the 2 ends of the table, the center pieces of wood should be flush with one another. If not, you can either sand them flush or make a straight cut to ensure the end pieces will be joined to a flat surface. All right, now we got our 2 ends glued on. We'll let it dry for 24 hours and then we'll take off our clamps. All right, everything is dry. We're gonna go ahead and unclamp everything and then we'll sand it down. Normally I would have cut these end pieces to be even with the edge of the middle, but because we have this rip in here that looks like a live edge, I had to extend it and then I'll cut it to the angle that the live edge is. Because this was rough cut cedar and there were several mill marks, I used my 7-inch disc sander to remove a bulk of the surface and then fine sanded it after with my palm sander going from 80 to 120 grit sandpaper. Now the tabletop is prepped for a finish, I'm going to build a base for it starting with some table legs that will be tapered on 2 sides. All right, to give you an idea of how I'm doing these table legs, this is a 4x4 post, and the first thing that I'll do is make the new dimensions of this 2 3/4 inches by 2 3/4 inches. Once I've achieved that, I'm gonna mark 6 inches from the top of my post, which is where I'll start my taper, and I'll come down to the bottom of the post. So if you had to imagine, this is where the remainder of the table leg will be after I cut off this portion and cut off this portion of the taper. Now I measured, once I had it down to 2 3/4 inches, I measured 1 7/8 inches over, and that's where I drew my line. And then again, 6 inches from the top. After marking my points, I drew my lines where I needed to cut, and if my table saw's blade went up another 1/8 of an inch, I probably would have used it for the legs, but it wound up being just as accurate using my circular saw. I repeated this process for all 4 legs. After tapering the legs, I sanded it smooth and then cut 2x4s to complete the rest of the table base. The 2x4s were cut to 40 inches for the long side of the table and 20 inches for the short side. If you want more room for movement, I'd recommend making these lengths a little bit longer. After sanding down the 2x4s, I was going to create a jig to attach the legs using wooden dowels, but for time and simplicity's sake, I decided to attach them using glue and pocket holes. I know there are better ways to attach a leg to a table so that it lasts for your children's children, but after screwing everything together, I was impressed at how solid the joints felt and there was no movement whatsoever. Using clamps to hold everything in place while screwing it together will help ensure everything stays in place when assembling the base. I assembled the table base upside down using a piece of plywood as a flat surface to help ensure that everything was level and square. Alright guys, I hope this gave you a good idea of what it takes to join some pieces of wood together to create a table. We're not going to do a finish in this video for the wood, mainly because we're gonna be giving this away to somebody else, and we're gonna let them decide whatever is gonna best fit their decor. If you wanted a dull look but you still wanted to see the grain, polyacrylic finish by Minwax is a good product. It would help just seal everything. But if you wanted to bring these rich reds out, you could use something like tung oil or even finish it with an epoxy resin to help it shine. If you have any questions, comment below. If you liked it, like it, and please subscribe. We'll see you next time. Peace and God bless.